Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Malik Bennett. I'm 40 years old, a trauma nurse, and a father. If you asked me to describe my life, I'd say, stable, until it wasn't. I didn't grow up in chaos or poverty. No, my pain came dressed in pressed slacks and cardigan sweaters. My wounds were paper cuts from the people who raised me, small, quiet, and deep enough to bleed for years. I grew up in Charlottesville, Virginia. Two-story home, trimmed hedges, the American flag waving on our porch every holiday. My parents, Douglas and Marcia Bennett, were white, upper-middle class, politically neutral, which in our house meant quiet dinners, subtle snubs, and a deep fear of rocking any boat. They believed in appearances more than truth, comfort more than justice. I was adopted at the age of 3. A brown-skinned boy in a white family. A photo opportunity for my mother's church group. A feather in my father's moral cap. They said I was chosen. They said I was blessed. But I knew the truth by the time I turned 6. I was tolerated, conditionally. As long as I made straight A's, stayed out of trouble, kept my tone polite and my clothes clean, they called me their son. But when I raised questions, wore my hair too long, or spent time with other black kids, the warmth faded. They called it concern. But it felt like shame. I learned to shrink myself, to fit into the corners they left for me. I never pushed back. Never questioned why I never saw baby photos of me on the mantle. Why my birthday gifts always felt like afterthoughts. Why my parents never once asked if I wanted to know about my birth family. I just wanted to belong. And for a while, I convinced myself I did. I went to UVA on a scholarship, pre-med, because Dad insisted I make something of myself. I chose nursing over medical school because I didn't want a title. I wanted to help people. To hold someone's hand when they were scared. To matter, even if it wasn't in the headlines. And then I met Jasmine. God. Jasmine. She was light. That's the only way I can describe her. A social worker, fierce and brilliant, with deep brown eyes and skin the color of roasted chestnuts. She laughed with her whole soul. Loved like it was oxygen. She saw me, the real me, and never once flinched. When I introduced her to my parents, the first words out of my mother's mouth were, "Oh. She's lovely." The pause before lovely said everything. Jasmine squeezed my hand under the table. I smiled like I didn't hear it. We married in a quiet courthouse ceremony. My parents didn't come. They said they were traveling. That was a lie. They just didn't approve. My sister, Lauren, came with her fiancé, sat in the back and left before the cake was cut. Jasmine never complained. Not once. 3 years later, our daughter, Amira, was born. And the first time I held her, I wept. Not just because she was perfect, but because I finally saw myself in someone else's eyes. Amira is beautiful. Light brown curls. Golden skin. Eyes that hold galaxies. And a heart so kind it humbles me. Jasmine taught her to be proud of her heritage. I taught her how to walk tall in a world that would try to shrink her. We raised her with love and truth. And for 9 years, I kept her away from my family. Until this past Thanksgiving. That decision will haunt me forever. It started with a letter in the mail. Handwritten. My father's cursive, meticulously neat. Malik. We've been thinking a lot about the past. About family. About mistakes. We'd like to invite you and your family to Thanksgiving dinner this year. It's time. Dad. Jasmine was hesitant. Rightfully so. Do you trust them? She asked. I didn't have an answer. But Amira had started asking about her grandparents. And something in me wanted to believe, desperately, that maybe they had changed. Maybe becoming grandparents had softened them. So I said yes. I should have said no. We drove to Charlottesville that morning, 3 hours in quiet anticipation. Jasmine had baked cornbread and brought a bottle of wine. Amira wore her favorite maroon dress with matching bows in her hair. She was excited, nervous, but hopeful. My parents' house looked the same, like a Pottery Barn catalog exploded on it. Pristine. Performed. Perfect for pictures. When we arrived, my mother hugged me stiffly. My father offered a firm handshake. Jasmine got a nod. Amira got a, well, look at you. You're certainly energetic. That was the first red flag. At dinner, they asked Amira what she wanted to be when she grew up. She said, a writer like mommy. My father scoffed. Let's aim for something practical, sweetheart. Maybe nursing like your dad. Jasmine's eyes darkened. I squeezed her hand under the table. Dessert came, and the kids went off to the den. Just us adults remained. And that's when the betrayal exploded. My mother, wine glass in hand, sighed dramatically. Malik, I need to ask, why didn't you raise Amira to behave more, politely? She talks back. She's too loud. She doesn't fit. Jasmine froze. Excuse me. She's always speaking up. Always asking questions. It's not ladylike. And frankly, she's not like the rest of our grandchildren. I felt my blood boil. What do you mean, not like? My father leaned in. We're just saying, Malik, she's not grateful. And she's not, well, let's be honest, she's not cute. Not in the way the others are. Jasmine stood. Her voice like ice. Say it. My mother blinked. She's an ugly, ungrateful black kid. There. Someone had to say it. The room went still. Something in me shattered. Jasmine grabbed Amira and walked out the front door without another word. I followed a moment later. My parents didn't call after us. The car ride home that night was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence that sits comfortably between two people who love each other, but the kind that aches. That suffocates. That clings to your skin like sweat and shame. Jasmine sat in the passenger seat, arms crossed, staring out the window. Amira had curled into the back seat, her little face turned away, the reflection of streetlights rolling over her cheeks like tears. I couldn't speak. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. My hands gripped the steering wheel like it was the only thing holding me together. The words kept echoing in my skull. She's an ugly, ungrateful black kid. Said by the woman who once called herself my mother. How did we get here? I pulled into our driveway at 10:42 p.m. Jasmine unbuckled Amira without a word and carried her into the house. I stood outside for a minute, in the cold, my breath fogging the air, as if hoping it could freeze the memory of what had happened. When I walked in, Jasmine had already laid Amira in bed. She was still wearing that maroon dress, now wrinkled and stained from where she had clutched her arms across her chest all night. I stood in the doorway, watching her sleep, and the guilt wrapped around my chest like a noose. She had wanted so badly to meet her grandparents. She had smiled, been kind, brought them handmade drawings. And they had spat in her face. With a smile. Malik, Jasmine said quietly behind me, what were you thinking? I turned. Her arms were folded again. Her eyes weren't angry, they were devastated. You said they changed, she continued. You said this was a chance for her to know them. I know, I choked. I thought. You thought wrong, she snapped, and her voice cracked. Our daughter was just called ugly. By your mother. And you didn't say a word when it happened. That hit me like a punch. Because she was right. I didn't say anything. Not fast enough. Not loud enough. I stood there in that dining room like I had all my life, quiet, ashamed, trying to keep the peace, trying not to start a fight. But that silence cost me my daughter's trust. I should have said something, I whispered. I froze. Jasmine sat down at the kitchen table, tears glistening in her eyes. You froze. I carried your child in my body, Malik. I birthed her. I raised her. And I sat across from two people who called her worthless, and I didn't hit them. I walked away. But you let them humiliate her. She wasn't yelling. That made it worse. I sat across from her, head in my hands. I didn't expect it to be that bad. You hoped they'd see Amira and finally see you, she said softly. But they didn't. And they never will. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up on the couch, staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of man I was. Wondering if I had just repeated the cycle I swore I'd end. I'd let my daughter walk into the same house that taught me to hate myself. The next morning, Amira came downstairs. She didn't run up to me like usual. She didn't ask for pancakes or her favorite cartoons. She just sat at the kitchen table, quiet, her curly hair a mess, her brown eyes distant. Morning, sweetheart, I said gently. She looked up and asked, Daddy, why did Grandma say I'm ugly? The world stopped turning. I sat beside her and reached for her hand, but she pulled it back. You told me I was beautiful. Were you lying? No. Never. I swallowed the lump in my throat. You are the most beautiful person I've ever known. She stared down at her lap. She didn't look at me like you do. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled. Amira, listen to me. What your grandma said, it was wrong. It was evil. It had nothing to do with you and everything to do with the hate in her heart. But she's your mom, she whispered. I know, I said. And that's why I should have protected you better. She looked up. Can we never go there again? Never, I promised. And I meant it. But inside, a storm was building. In the days that followed, Jasmine spoke only when necessary. She went to work, came home, and slept on the edge of the bed. I didn't blame her. I'd broken a sacred trust, not between us, but between a mother and the world she thought her child would be safe in. Amira stopped writing. She loved writing. She used to spend hours scribbling stories in her little notebook, tales of princesses and warriors and magical forests. But now the notebook sat on her desk, unopened. Every night, I watched her stare at it and then walk away. That was the worst part. Not the slap that never came. Not the insult from my mother. Not the cold silence from my father. It was watching the light dim in my daughter's eyes. I tried everything. Ice cream. A trip to the zoo. A surprise visit to the bookstore. She smiled, sometimes. But the sparkle didn't return. One evening, I overheard her whispering to Jasmine, Mommy, if I had lighter skin, would Grandma like me? That was the night Jasmine came into the living room, sat down beside me, and finally let the tears fall. She's blaming herself, Malik, she sobbed. She thinks it's her fault. Our baby is carrying this weight and she's only 9. I took her hand and held it like a lifeline. I'll fix this, I said. You can't fix what your parents broke. I won't let them break her completely. That's when the seed of revenge first took root. It wasn't rage at first. It was pain. Sharp, relentless pain. But under that pain was a deeper, colder flame. One that said, they tried to erase your daughter's light. Make sure the world sees her shine brighter than ever. The world went on like it always does, indifferent to the breaking hearts inside quiet homes. Amira still went to school. Jasmine still woke early, brushed Amira's curls into neat ponytails, packed her lunch with care, and walked her to the door like always. I still put on my scrubs, clocked into the ER, and worked my shifts at St. Jude's Hospital, where no one knew my soul was bleeding. But something in me had changed. At first, I thought I just wanted to protect Amira. That I just wanted to shield her from the poison my family tried to pour into her skin. But deep down, I also wanted the truth exposed. Not just to them, but to the world. I wanted them to be held accountable, not just in the privacy of our pain, but in a way they couldn't ignore. Couldn't deny. I started documenting everything. The words my mother said. The look on my father's face. The fact that they had invited us under false pretenses, only to humiliate my child. I didn't know yet what I would do with it, but I knew I needed to build something. And then, the letter came. It was from a lawyer. Addressed to me, certified mail. I opened it with a casual curiosity that quickly turned into dread. Dear Mr. Malik Bennett. I am writing on behalf of your late grandfather, Theodore Jameson, whose estate has remained partially unsettled due to undisclosed beneficiaries. As his biological grandchild, you have rights under Virginia inheritance law to review his estate holdings. A trust exists in your name. Please contact our office immediately. I froze. Biological grandchild? I had never met Theodore Jameson. I barely knew his name. But now, suddenly, someone was telling me I had a rightful claim to a trust one knew nothing about. I called the number listed. The receptionist confirmed everything. My grandfather, a man I had never met, who had apparently passed away 5 years ago, had included me in his will. But the trustee hadn't been able to locate me until now because my name had been deliberately removed from family records. Deliberately. I sat at the kitchen table that night, the weight of the truth unraveling inside me like a spool of thread. My parents didn't just disapprove of my marriage. They didn't just insult my child. They had hidden an inheritance from me. Scrubbed my name from legal documents. And in doing so, had withheld what could have been life-changing support for my family. They didn't want a black son to inherit the Jameson legacy. And suddenly, everything made sense. The disdain. The rejection. The desperate last-minute invitation. It hadn't come from guilt, it had come from fear. They knew I was close to being found. And they tried to pull me back into the fold before that happened. But they were too late. I had the letter. I had the truth. And now, I had a plan. I scheduled a meeting with the estate lawyer. When I showed up with my documentation, he raised an eyebrow and said, "You've been hard to find, Mr. Bennett." Or should I say, "Mr. Jameson." What do you mean? He slid a file across the table. Inside were photos, letters, and, most damning, a notarized affidavit from my grandfather himself. I have one grandson born to my daughter Marcia. He is adopted, but blood of my blood. His name is Malik. If my daughter does not disclose this, she is to be removed from the estate. My breath caught. My mother. Marcia. My adoptive mother was Theodore's biological daughter, and I was his only grandchild. The lawyer explained it clearly. My grandfather had created a clause in his will stating that if I was not properly acknowledged or included, my parents would forfeit their inheritance. I asked, "So, what does that mean now?" The lawyer leaned back, smiling slightly. "It means you control the estate. Every dollar. Every property. Every piece of the Jameson legacy." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in Amira's room, watching her sleep peacefully under her unicorn bedsheet, her hand still wrapped around a pencil and a half-finished story in her lap. She didn't know it yet, but everything was about to change. And I didn't want revenge anymore. I wanted justice, with a little poetic flair. Jasmine and I spent the next 3 days creating a plan. She was hesitant at first, worried it would hurt Amira more to dig up the past. But when I told her what my parents had done, intentionally hiding her inheritance, she nodded. "Let's do it right," she said. "Let's make sure they can never spin this." So I hired a videographer. We recorded a personal message. Not for TikTok. Not for gossip. But for the Jameson Foundation's official annual donor meeting, a live-streamed event where the family would be honored for their philanthropic contributions to the community. Because guess what? I now own the foundation too. The plan was never to humiliate them. Not at first. But some betrayals don't deserve silence. Some truths need to be said, out loud, in public, with the whole damn world watching. Once I learned the full extent of the Jameson estate, and how my parents deliberately erased me from it, I didn't want vengeance. I wanted accountability. Legacy meant everything to my parents. Their last name, their reputation, the idea that they were part of some proud, polished bloodline. They didn't care about love, not really. They cared about how things looked. So I decided to give them a mirror. A national one. It just so happened that the Jameson Foundation, a charitable trust once controlled by my grandfather, hosted a gala every spring. That gala had become one of Virginia's most high-profile community events, celebrating donors, honorees, and the family name. It was also an exclusive invite-only event, held at a private ballroom, live-streamed for the press and donors. And guess who used to be seated front and center every year? My parents. Douglas and Marcia Bennett. The proud guardians of the Jameson legacy. Except now, they were no longer in charge. I was. And they didn't know it. Yet. With Jasmine's help, I spent 2 weeks coordinating the shift quietly. I contacted the event planner, the venue, the board of trustees. The lawyer had already processed the trust transfer, so every decision came down to me. I updated the speaker list, the itinerary, the award honorees. But the highlight? The final segment, a message from the true legacy. I arranged for a videographer to shoot it in our living room. Jasmine sat beside me. Amira, now ready to speak her truth, sat between us in her favorite green sweater. I stared into the lens and said, "My name is Malik Bennett. I am the only grandson of Theodore Jameson. I was adopted into the Bennett family, but I was born his blood. And for years, my existence was hidden, erased, denied, because of the color of my skin. My daughter, Amira, was recently called an ugly, ungrateful black kid, by the very people who claimed to love me. People who sat at this gala year after year, pretending to be pillars of virtue, while hiding their racism behind charity." I paused, voice shaking, but I continued. "This is not about revenge. It's about truth. The foundation my grandfather built was meant to support families, uplift children, and create a legacy of honesty. I intend to honor that. So today, I am announcing the new direction of the Jameson Foundation. We will no longer fund performative causes or maintain ties with those who build fences around their hearts. This legacy now belongs to my daughter. To Amira. And to every child who's ever been told they don't belong." Then Amira spoke, her little voice calm and clear. "I'm not ugly. I'm not ungrateful. I'm just a girl who writes stories and wants to be loved. And I'm not ashamed of who I am." She smiled into the camera. And I knew it then. This wasn't just revenge. It was redemption. The invitations were sent out a week before the gala. My parents received theirs just like every year. The envelope bore the Jameson seal. The embossed lettering. The curated language. But the signature at the bottom? Chairman, Malik Jameson Bennett. I later found out they were livid. My sister, Lauren, called and left a voicemail. "Malik, what the hell is this? Are you seriously trying to shame Mom and Dad? You're just stirring things up again. For what? For attention? Grow up." I didn't respond. I was too busy finishing the new banner that would hang behind the ballroom stage. Legacy is truth. Not silence. The night of the gala arrived. I wore a navy blue suit. Jasmine wore deep gold. And Amira, our radiant, brilliant Amira, wore an emerald green dress that shimmered under the lights. The venue was packed. Donors. Reporters. Politicians. Community leaders. Everyone dressed to impress, champagne flutes in hand, polite laughter echoing off marble columns. We arrived last. Heads turned. Some recognized me from the foundation newsletter. Others looked confused. Then I saw them, my parents, sitting at table 2 near the front. My mother's smile froze when she saw me. My father stood halfway, as if trying to confirm what he was seeing. But I walked past them, hand in hand with my daughter, straight to the front row, where our names were printed on place cards. Malik Bennett. Jasmine Bennett. Amira Bennett. The new face of the Jameson legacy. Dinner passed in awkward waves. People kept glancing our way. My parents didn't approach us. But I could see them whispering. Fidgeting. Waiting. Then the lights dimmed. The event host, a trustee who had known my grandfather, stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "tonight we honor not just the past, but the truth. And for the first time in this foundation's history, we welcome its rightful heir. Please watch this message." The screen flickered to life. Our video played. Every word. Every truth. Every tremble in Amira's voice. The room went silent. Gasps. Some tears. Then, applause. Real applause. When the lights returned, the host said simply, "The Jameson legacy lives on, in hands that never forgot its purpose." The applause from the video hadn't even died down when I turned around in my chair and met my parents' eyes. My mother looked like she'd been slapped. Not by my words, but by the fact that others had clapped for them. For me. For the granddaughter she had tried to erase. My father stared ahead, stone-faced, gripping the edge of the table so hard his knuckles were white. I wasn't sure what I expected. Anger? Shame? Maybe regret? But what I saw was fear. Fear of being exposed. Fear of losing control. Fear of the very thing they used to weaponize against me, public image. And now the truth was out. When the gala ended, dozens of people approached us. Colleagues, donors, strangers who had heard our story. They congratulated Amira. They shook Jasmine's hand. They told me how brave we were. Some even whispered things like, "I never liked how smug your father always was. It's about time someone called them out." A few board members approached with genuine emotion in their eyes. One said, "Your grandfather would have been proud. He always wanted the foundation to reflect integrity. You brought that back." I nodded, throat tight, because I had waited my whole life for someone to say that. Not about who I was on paper. But who I was in my bones. The very next week, I began making changes. Real ones. I called an emergency meeting of the Jameson Foundation Board. As acting chairman, I revoked honorary titles previously given to my parents. Their names were removed from the annual brochure. From the website. From the Legacy Hall plaque inside the main building. They were erased, not from malice, but from justice. In their place, I renamed the Scholarship Fund. The Amira Bennett Fund for Empowering Girls of Color. The first recipients: 5 young girls from underserved neighborhoods in Richmond, ages 9 to 14. One of them looked at Amira and said, "I want to be like you when I grow up." Amira beamed. "You can be better." Jasmine watched, tears in her eyes, as our daughter stood in front of a podium, reading from one of her short stories to a crowd of beaming faces. She was no longer shrinking from the world. She was rising. And every inch of that stage belonged to her. I thought it might end there. That they'd crawl back under the rock of silence, mutter bitter words behind closed doors, and disappear from our lives forever. But people like my parents don't vanish quietly. A few weeks after the gala, I got an email. Subject line, from Mom. You've ruined everything. Your grandfather is rolling in his grave. We were protecting you from shame. And now you've embarrassed us in front of the entire city. I hope you're happy. Mom. No apology. No accountability. Just guilt and gaslighting. I didn't reply. Instead, I took that email and printed it out. I placed it in a folder labeled closure. That same week, my father called. He didn't leave a voicemail. I didn't call back. Because I was done answering to ghosts. What I wasn't done with was building. With the foundation now under my direction, I restructured every program. I partnered with schools to create after-school writing programs. I launched a mental health initiative for kids of color who faced racial trauma in the classroom. We funded books. Built reading corners. Gave children the tools to tell their own stories instead of letting the world write them out. And at the heart of it all was Amira. She was only 9, but already, she had taught me more about courage than any adult ever had. She didn't ask to be the face of anything. She just kept writing. Kept being kind. Kept being herself. And in doing so, she made the darkness smaller, one story at a time. One night, a few months later, we were sitting on the porch after dinner. The cicadas buzzed. The stars were out. Amira sat curled up in a blanket on my lap, notebook in hand. "Daddy?" she asked. "Yeah, baby. Do you think Grandma ever loved you?" I was silent for a moment. Then I said, "I think she loved the idea of me. Not who I really was." Amira nodded slowly. "She didn't love me at all." I looked down at her. "She didn't know how," I said. "But that's not your fault. That's hers." Amira didn't cry. She just looked back up at the stars and whispered, "I feel sorry for her." "Why?" "Because she'll never know how good it feels to love me." My throat closed. And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't need my parents to love me either. Because my daughter did. And she was everything. Just when you think the worst is behind you, the past finds a way to knock again, this time with a knife behind its back. It had been 6 months since the gala. The foundation was thriving. Amira had become a beloved figure in local media, the young author changing the world with her words. Jasmine had written a beautiful op-ed in The Atlantic titled, "What My Daughter Taught Me About Surviving Racism with Grace." And me? I finally felt proud. Settled. Like I had done something right. Until the betrayal came. And it came from the one person I had quietly held out hope for. My sister, Lauren. I hadn't spoken to Lauren since the voicemail she left after the gala. She never apologized. Never called to explain. But I figured, fine. Let her go. So imagine my surprise when I got a call from the foundation's lawyer one morning. "Malik, we have a problem. Someone filed an appeal to contest your position as sole heir to the Jameson estate." I blinked. "What?" He sighed. "Your sister. Lauren Bennett. She's claiming the foundation was meant to pass to the eldest biological child of Marcia Bennett, and that you, being adopted, have no legal standing." I felt my stomach turn to stone. "She's claiming I'm not really part of the family?" I asked, my voice sharp. "She's claiming you manipulated your way into the estate. That you used Amira's public victimhood to sway the board and steal what rightfully belonged to her." My blood ran cold. This wasn't just greed. This was betrayal, again, from the same bloodline that once held me like a photo prop and discarded me like a broken frame. But this time, I wouldn't stand still. That night, I sat Jasmine down and told her everything. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She just said, "They're threatened, Malik. You did what none of them could, you turned pain into power. And they can't stand it. Amira was sitting nearby, headphones on, scribbling in her notebook. I stared at her, wondering what she'd think if she knew her own aunt was trying to erase her family, again. The thought made something in me crack. "I'm taking this to court," I said. Jasmine nodded. "Good." The trial date was set for 6 weeks later. Lauren showed up with a polished lawyer and a smug little smile. She wore a pearl necklace, a designer dress, and the same air of superiority I remembered from every childhood memory. I almost laughed. Here she was, trying to reclaim a legacy she never cared about, only now that it had money, press, and shine. Her attorney tried to paint a picture of manipulation. That I used race to guilt people into sympathy. That Amira's story was emotional propaganda. That I wasn't Theodore Jameson's true heir. But our lawyer came with something stronger than arguments. He came with records. My birth certificate, signed by Marcia herself. A DNA test linking me to Theodore Jameson beyond doubt. And finally, the video affidavit from my grandfather that named me, explicitly, as his only heir. When that video played in court, when Theodore said, in his own voice, "My grandson Malik carries not just my name, but my heart," I saw Lauren go pale. The judge dismissed her appeal that same day. But before we left, I walked up to her in the hallway. She wouldn't meet my eyes. So I said, "You had one job, protect family. Instead, you tried to destroy it. I don't care if you hate me. But trying to hurt my daughter to get to me? You lost the last piece of your soul when you did that." She tried to speak, but I shook my head. "You're not my sister anymore." Then I turned and walked away, toward Jasmine and Amira, waiting for me just beyond the courtroom doors. The press had a field day. Headlines read: "Sister of Foundation heir loses appeal in public court battle. Family drama rocks Jameson legacy, but the heir stands firm." Amira didn't care about the headlines. She just asked, "Does this mean Aunt Lauren doesn't love us?" I sat beside her on the couch and answered honestly. "I don't know if she ever did." Amira nodded, thoughtful. "Then we don't need her. She can't be in our story if she doesn't want to be." That night, I stood in Amira's room as she slept and realized something powerful. They had tried to erase me. Then they tried to erase her. But now, we were writing our own legacy, one they couldn't touch. I used to think closure meant reconciliation. That one day, the people who hurt you would see the light, fall to their knees, and say, "I'm sorry. I was wrong." But the truth is, sometimes closure is knowing you no longer need their apology. Sometimes it's the strength to say, "You're no longer welcome in my life, and that's your loss, not mine." 3 months after the court ruled in our favor, I made the final decision that would close the book on my past for good. The Jameson Legacy Library was under construction, a new wing of the city library funded by the foundation. It would hold writing workshops, digital access labs, and thousands of books by authors of color. It would be free to the public. And it would bear the name of a girl who had already changed the world with her words. The Amira Bennett Children's Library. The grand opening was scheduled for the following fall. I personally invited teachers, families, donors, and press. But not my parents. Not Lauren. They found out anyway, of course they did. And like clockwork, 2 days before the event, my mother emailed. "You can't keep her from us forever. She's our family, too. No greeting. No remorse. Just entitlement." I didn't reply. Instead, I printed the email, tore it in half, and fed it into the shredder. Then I returned to what mattered, watching Amira rehearse her speech. She stood at the podium in our living room, clutching her note cards with tiny, ink-smudged fingers. "Want to hear it again, Daddy?" I smiled. "Always." She cleared her throat and began. "My name is Amira Bennett. I'm 10 years old, and I love writing stories. But this one is real. This one is mine. A long time ago, someone told me I didn't belong. That I was too loud, too dark, too different. But my mommy told me that stories make us powerful. And my daddy told me that no one can erase who you are, unless you let them. So this library is for every kid who's been told they're too much or not enough. You're just right. And you belong. She paused, beaming. I stood and applauded. So did Jasmine, who wiped tears from her eyes. That was it. That was our justice. Not a court win. Not a news headline. This. Our daughter, standing tall, unafraid, unapologetically herself. The library opened to a full house. Kids lined up outside holding donated books. Teachers hugged Amira. Local reporters captured the ribbon cutting. Inside, murals covered the walls, painted by local artists and students. One showed a black girl flying above a burning house, her wings made of pages. Below it read, "Some stories burn bridges. Others build new worlds." That was Amira's quote. She didn't just cut the ribbon that day, she rewrote history. She didn't just speak into a microphone, she shattered generations of silence. My parents never showed up. Lauren never sent another message. And I didn't care. Because the chapter that began that Thanksgiving, when my daughter was insulted in front of a room of people who claimed to love me, was finally over. Not with vengeance. With victory. A year later, Amira's second published book hit the shelves. The Girl Who Drew Doors. It was about a little girl who could draw portals with her pencil, each one leading away from pain, fear, and rejection, and into something more. Love. Hope. Home. On the dedication page, she wrote, "To Mommy, who gave me roots. To Daddy, who gave me wings. And to every child who's ever been told they don't belong. You do." In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.